Hey, what's going on, DDO players? Axel here. Today's video is all about the Half-Orc Race and the Half-Orc Enhancement tree. Let's start with some basics. Half-Orcs are the only race to get a +2 to their strength upon character creation. However, they receive a -2 to charisma and a -2 to intelligence. So naturally, the race is geared towards melee builds. And to be honest, it's not the strongest race in the game, in my opinion, from a pure min-max perspective, but they can be great for certain builds, but they tend to be very build specific. And the race is very much built for two-handed fighting. If you aren't going two-handed fighting, you probably don't want to use Half-Orc because you won't be able to benefit from a lot of their enhancements. There are some good things about their racial tree, however. They get something called Brutality, which is an enhancement that increases their damage by +20% against helpless enemies. They also get a lot of bonuses to strength in the tree, so in addition to two-handed fighting builds, Half-Orcs can be good for builds that want to utilize a feat like Stunning Blow that constantly puts their enemies into a helpless state. This allows them to take advantage of the +20% damage from Brutality. Or if you're in a static group, Half-Orcs can be very party dependent. If you have, say, a monk in your party that spams Stunning Fists constantly, Half-Orc becomes a more attractive race because you'll be able to benefit from that +20% against helpless enemies a lot more often. So Half-Orcs are good for classes that plan to take Stunning Blow, and they're good for melee builds that run with other players who use stunning, holds, any kind of effects that put enemies into a helpless state on a consistent basis. Now, this is not to say that Half-Orc is an optimal choice for these types of builds. You could certainly make an argument that Human is a better choice than Half-Orc for most any build. Humans get healing amp at low tiers, they get an extra feat, they get human damage boost, and it's hard for Half-Orcs to compete against that. But when we're talking about builds like pure fighters that get tons of extra feats, or barbarian fighter splashes that get extra feats, you may not miss the human extra feat as much. So Half-Orc could be a attractive choice in those situations. Also, if you're the type of player who doesn't like hitting action boosts in combat, such as human damage boosts, you may prefer the passive bonuses to damage in the Half-Orc tree over anything that over the human damage boosts offered in the human tree. Another thing to keep in mind about the race is their bonus damage from their enhancements do not scale into epics. They are flat +1, +2 type bonuses to your damage. So as you get into epics, these damage enhancements tend to not to be worth the action points because they don't scale into epics. And the epic abilities you receive really overshadow these Half-Orc racial enhancements. So Half-Orcs as a race are a lot better in heroics than they are in epics. But DDO isn't always about min-maxing, and it shouldn't always be about min-maxing. Half-Orcs can be a blast just from a flavor perspective. They have the largest body type in the game, and they have a very unique look. They're also a very rare race in game, so if you like playing a race that's unique, Half-Orc is a great choice. Also, Half-Orcs have a different combat animation than every race in the game except for Purple Dragon Knight. And sometimes it's just fun to have a character that plays as a giant monster. And another fun feature is, because of their large body type, their weapons scale to be much bigger than other races, except Purple Dragon Knights, of course. This is just cosmetic, they don't do more damage, but it's kind of a fun flavor thing about the class. It's just fun to run around as a big monster with a giant weapon. And rarely does your choice of race make or break your build in DDO. So if you think Half-Orcs are cool and you're going to have a blast playing them, you should play them. And now we're going to go through the Half-Orc enhancement tree one by one, and I'll talk about each enhancement and what the advantages, disadvantages are, and if I think you should take the enhancement or not take it. And I want to start by saying that I'm not rubber stamping this video as a comprehensive guide. These are just my thoughts and opinions, so you may very well disagree. I'm not claiming to be all-knowing, and I'm not claiming that this video is going to be absolutely perfect in terms of reflecting a min-max approach to the race. With that said, let's move on to the cores. The Half-Orc cores are mostly made up of the Orcish Fury enhancement, which gives Half-Orcs bonuses to strength based on how much health they have remaining. So at tier 1 they gain a +2 bonus to strength at 80% health, a +4 when they are below 60% health, and +8 when they are below 40% health. From my experience, these enhancements really are not worth it in the cores, and you should try and take as few of them as possible, especially this fifth tier or this third tier, which requires you to be below 40% health. It's just not that practical. It really does not make sense to keep your health that low. You don't want to end up dead. It's also just not very practical. It's so hard to stay alive and in these ranges and to keep your health below these ranges to benefit from this strength. Now, there's some level 28 barbarians who can probably get some nice benefits, or level 28 fighters who can get some really nice benefits from this because they have ginormous, huge inflated HP pools, and they can stay, say, at 60% health or less and be just fine. But I think for most toons, it's just not a very practical enhancement, and it's just not very dependable. If you're depending on this for your stunning blow DCs, you're going to have a rough time. So overall with the cores, I would take as few of these as possible. Let's move on to the next part of the core, which is Orcas Strength. Now, this is just a bonus to strength, plus 1 strength here and plus another strength here for 4 action points is pretty expensive, but like I mentioned earlier, if you're a half-orc and you're going for stunning blow and high stunning blow DC, then it might not be a bad investment. Let's move on to the first tier, which is the half-orc dragon marks, which are actually pretty nice. Now, from a pure min-max perspective, no, you're not going to want to take these. But if you're willing to give up a little bit of min-maxing for some versatility and convenience, then they might be for you. Now, to take a dragon mark enhancement, it requires that you take a dragon mark feat. This might not be practical for, say, a pure barbarian who is feat starved, but for, say, a pure fighter who has tons of extra feats, it's probably not a big issue if they give a feat for a dragon mark. Now, the first tier here just adds to your search and adds to your dragon mark usage, but as you get up higher in this dragon mark line, you receive some nicer enhancements, and we'll move on and talk about those when we get to them. But for now, let's move on to the next tier 1, which Mighty Sundering. Sunder and Improved Sunder just aren't that great nowadays. They're very situational. Also, the animation is very slow, and the fort reduction especially is very situational. It can be nice against raid bosses, and Improved Sunder used to be a big thing back when cap was 20 and people wanted to reduce Eretrikos, who's the raid boss for Shroud, his fortification. But these days it's just so situational that I wouldn't recommend that you invest much in Sunder. Okay, let's move on to Brute Force. Brute Force actually has 2 different options. There's Brutal Spellcasting and Brutal Fighting. Now, these both add to your threat when you're spellcasting or when you're fighting. Now, I don't really see the point of there being a Brutal Spellcasting since half-orcs are almost never casters, so I just don't see that being very practical. I mean, why would you... Now, if you're running, say, maybe you want to run a half-orc Pale Master or something for threat or for flavor, and you want him to be tanky and you want threat for that, maybe that would be good for Brutal Spellcasting, but I think it's going to be very rare that you're going to have a half-orc caster who's actually going to consider this, much less there be a half-orc caster at all. But let's move on to brute fighting. Now, if you're a fighter or you're a tanky build, this can be a nice enhancement. It gives you up to 20% based on which tier you take. It can get you up to 20% extra threat. And like I said, if you're a tank, this can be nice. And also the brute fighting enhancement is a prerequisite for the lock bash enhancement, which we'll get to in just a minute. But if you're a tank and you want mobs near you and you want your build to kind of absorb more aggro, then this enhancement might be worth it to you. Okay, now let's move on to that Orcish weapon training line, which is the big feature of this class. It's kind of the what really defines, other than some of the other tier 5 enhancements, it's what people mostly think of when they look at the half-orc tree. And this is the enhancement that I was referencing earlier that really does not scale well into epics, but it is pretty useful in heroics. What it does is, for each tier you get bonuses to hit and damage. And on certain tiers you get extra damage. And I believe at the end of the day it adds up to something like +7 to hit and plus 8 damage. I may be wrong on that. +2, 3, 4. Okay, it looks like +6 to damage. I'd have to double check that. But it adds to your hit to damage. But like I said, it does not scale. It's not a percentage damage increase. It's just a +2 damage, +1 damage, depending on which enhancement. So it's a flat increase to your damage. Because of how AP intensive this is, it requires a lot of action point enhancements. I mean, certain tiers are 2 action points, some are 1, or some are, I think some are 1. Let me see. Oh, nope, I was wrong. They're all 2 points. So that's 8 action points for just a handful of extra damage and to hit. It's always nice to have extra damage, but those action points can be better spent often in other trees when we're talking about epics. Now in heroics, I think it can be a decent choice, especially if you just hate hitting in combat boosts like human action boosts and would rather have something passive. They can be a decent choice in epics to get some extra damage. So like I said, this is kind of why half-orcs are not the greatest in epics. This damage does not scale, and if they ever do a racial tree pass, I hope that they convert this to some kind of percentage increase in damage or perhaps melee power. But as for right now, it's not really worth it in epics just because of how many action points it takes up. Let's move on to Stubborn. Stubborn is just a bonus to your will saves. I wouldn't recommend this. It's just, I don't think it's worth the action points. If you're running, say, a fighter or a barbarian, you're probably going to have very weak will saves because wisdom is going to be a dump stat for you, and wisdom is what your will saves are based upon. So I don't see +3 to will saves, even if you take all 3 tiers, really gonna be worth it. Now maybe if you're a half-orc paladin or something, you're going to have competitive saves and you want a bit more will saves, it might not be a bad choice. But I would say for most builds, like half-orc fighters and barbarians, you're probably not going to want to waste your action points here. Okay, moving on to the next tier. The second tier here with the dragon mark gives you knock. Now, that's not really relevant. The value of taking this enhancement is it's a prerequisite for the enhancement Lock Bash, which I'll get to next. And you're going to want to use Lock Bash instead of Knock because Knock bases your DC for your open lock check on your Charisma modifier, whereas Lock Bash, which we'll get to now, Lock Bash bases it on your Intimidate skill and your Strength modifier. And if you're running a two-handed fighting half-orc melee, your Strength and Intimidate is going to be way higher than your Charisma. Half-orcs, like I mentioned earlier, actually get a -2 to Charisma upon character creation. So unless you're running a half-orc paladin, you're not going to have much in terms of Charisma on your half-orc. Or I guess if you're running, say, like a some other flavor type build, maybe something like a sorcerer, possibly, maybe a Eldritch Knight sorcerer. You might have some charisma, but for most builds you're not going to have the charisma, so you're going to want to use Lock Bash to power your open lock if it's a route you want to take. So on to Lock Bash now. Lock Bash, as you might infer from the name, gives you the ability to open lock chests. It's very nice to have. It's a convenience thing. It's not something that from a min-max perspective is worth taking because it doesn't add to your damage or survivability, which in DDO it's in terms of building a character for min-max, it's all about damage and survivability. But if you're willing to give a little bit of that up and spend some action points on conveniences or abilities that make your character more versatile, Lock Bash is not a bad choice. It's nice to be able to open lock chests. And a class like Fighter that has tons of extra feats is probably not going to care to give up a feat for the Dragon Mark, which is, like I mentioned earlier, is a prereq for this enhancement. So it's probably more attractive to, say, a Half-Orc Fighter. But overall, like I said, if you like it, if you want to be able to open locks, it's an option. From a min-max perspective, probably not the optimal choice, but if you want some versatility and are willing to give up some APs and other enhancements, then take it. Why not? Okay, moving on. The extra action boost. This is a nice enhancement if you... it's always nice to have extra uses of, say, haste boost for your fighter or any other action boosts you might have. It's nice to have. If you don't take any extra action boosts, you're only going to start with 5 action boosts total. So if you can up this to 8, it can be really nice and it can really extend your burst damage in combat. Okay, let's move on to Orcish Rage. I wouldn't recommend this. First of all, what this enhancement does, it adds +2 primal bonus to your strength, which is going to stack with almost everything. But you suffer a -20 PRR, -20 to your PRR, and you cannot cast spells when you're in Orcish Rage. So overall, I wouldn't recommend it. It's really not worth it in my opinion, especially if you're not a barbarian. And if you're not a barbarian, it's going to cut off your casting abilities, your self-healing abilities, and even if you are a barbarian, it's only 2 strength, which is not going to be a big difference in your DPS. Perhaps the only class combination I could really see maybe arguing for this is, say, perhaps like a 18 barbarian 2 fighter, something like that, who builds for stunning blow, who just wants the extra DC and doesn't care about the -20 PRR. And in Heroics, the -20 PRR is a big deal because in Heroics you really don't have anything other than heavy armor to really increase your PRR. Now there's a few things, but you have a lot tougher time offsetting that -20 PRR in Heroics than you do in Epics. Let's move on to the final Dragon Mark, which is the Greater Dragon Mark of Finding. And this gives you the ability to bless chests. If you don't know what that is, when you bless a chest, you'll increase the loot level by 1, assuming you succeed on your roll. A couple problems with this though. The animation for blessing a chest is pretty long, and people in most groups are not going to wait for you to bless every chest before they open it. But if you're an experienced player, the real advantage from most chests is getting junk loot to sell for platinum, and if you already have tons of platinum, you really aren't going to care most of the time about the loot level of your chest. But if you're a newer player and you want more platinum, or you just want to be able to bless chests for the higher chances at better loot, then why not? Why not take this? But like I mentioned with the other Dragon Mark enhancements and Lock Bash, it's probably not worth it from a pure min-max perspective, but if you're willing to give up some of that for some versatility and flavor on your character, then take it. Why not? Okay, let's move on to Greater Weapon Aptitude. Now this adds a chance for your glancing blows to proc weapon effects more often, and the effectiveness of this enhancement is going to vary on what type of weapon you're using. If you're using a weapon with no weapon effects like flaming on it, then you're not going to benefit from this enhancement. But if you have a weapon with tons of different effects like flaming and burst, whatever, on there, then you're going to benefit from this more. And I'll be honest, I haven't run the math on this, but from my experience, the increase is just so marginal. It goes from 2 to 4 to 6%. I don't see it as being worth the action points. But again, like I said, I have not run the math, but I don't see this as being worth it. If you have run the math and you can prove it, please post that below, and I'd be happy to hear it. Improved power attack. This gives you effectively +3 base damage to your power attack enhancement if you've taken it, but if you're a two-handed fighting barbarian, you will of course take power attack. It's an awesome enhancement for two-handed fighting. It can be a decent boost, and I'm kind of up in the air about this one because while more damage is always nice, this isn't adding to strength, so you're not getting extra stunning blow DCs out of this. And it's only 3 damage, and you're spending 6 action points for it. So I haven't run the math on this either, so I can't really say for sure, but it's really expensive. But I don't know. I just want to say I don't know. It may be worth it for you, it may be not. If you want extra damage, go for it. If you think it's too expensive and you just can't fit these extra 6 action points in on your build, or if you don't need them to get up to this 5th tier, then maybe you shouldn't take it. I would probably take it on my Half-Orc just because if you're going to run Half-Orc, you may as well take stuff like this. Okay, let's move on to Raging Crush. Raging Crush is actually a really nice little combat ability. It guarantees that your next melee attack is going to be a critical hit. Some of the disadvantages is that there's very limited uses. As you can see in the description here, you only get 3 uses per day. But otherwise, a guaranteed crit is very nice. And if you're a barbarian, you have to be raging while doing this. So this means that you need to be a barbarian really to take advantage of this. And if you're a barbarian and you have room on your health bar, then I don't see any reason why not to take this. Why you shouldn't take this. It's very cheap. It's only 1 action point. So I would probably take it if I'm a barbarian. I think it's definitely a good enhancement. I mean, a guaranteed crit, that's a lot of damage. Even though there's limited uses of this enhancement, it's only 1 action point. Okay, let's move on to Brutality, which in my opinion is the best enhancement in the Half-Orc tree, and it's one of the few compelling reasons to go with Half-Orc. When you're using a two-handed weapon, Brutality will increase the damage to helpless opponents by 20%. And this is one of the reasons I believe if you're going to run Half-Orc, you should build in Stunning Blow, because with Stunning Blow, your enemy is put into a helpless state, and Half-Orcs are going to do plus 20% damage against those enemies. And like I mentioned earlier, it's very party. It depends a lot on your party how good this enhancement is. If you're running, say, with a monk that spams stunning fists all the time and stuns trash mobs everywhere, then this enhancement's going to be a lot stronger for you. Or if you're, say, running with an enhancement wizard who's going to constantly be dancing enemies or holding them, then this enhancement's going to be a lot better for you. But if you're going to go Half-Orc, I would definitely go for this enhancement. It's one of the really few nice perks of being a Half-Orc. Let's finish with Power Rage. It's a decent enhancement. It's 2 strength for 2 action points, and losing the 2 to AC is not a big deal. AC is, to be honest, it's a bit broken in the game today. It's something that you need to invest a lot in to really do well at. PRR is a lot more important than AC, so -2 to AC is almost nothing. And at 2 action points for 2 strength, it's actually a pretty decent deal, and it's going to give you an extra DC to your Stunning Blow. It does require at least 6 levels of Barbarian for the second tier and 2 levels of Barbarian for the first tier. And it also requires you to be raging to use this. So it's actually a pretty good enhancement. It's cheap, so if you have Stunning below, it's 2 action points for a DC. I think it's worth it. I want to finish by saying that for a lot of builds, it's tough to argue Half-Orc over Human or Blade Forged because a race like Human gets a lot of nice stuff like an extra feat, heal amp, human damage boost for pretty cheap, or for, in the case of the feat, for free, and Blade Forged gets some awesome self-healing. But Half-Orcs certainly are a good choice for your two-handed fighting builds. I'm not going to say they're the best, but they're definitely a good choice, and especially if you just want to run a heroic character, they are even better because their abilities are good in heroics, lose a little bit of their luster in epics, but if you're just looking for a fun race to play from levels 1 to 20 for maybe a life that you're going to TR out of, or if you just really like the race, I recommend you play them because they are a rare race from a flavor perspective. It's very fun to play as a big monster that beats on enemies. They have unique combat animations, and they have the highest damage potential of any race. So if you just care about building a character that does ton of damage, Half-Orc is not a bad choice at all. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please subscribe and tell your DDO friends and guildies about my channel. Thanks for watching.